Welcome, readers, to the second in a series of 4 weekly talks on the 2021 Summer Read Selection, You Belong, by Sebene Selassie. Hello, I'm Ryan Bankert, Adult Services Manager at Guthrie Memorial Library. Wellspan Health, WITF's Transforming Health, Capital Blue Cross, and 80 libraries throughout the central Pennsylvania region are in collaboration for this year's Summer Read program. We welcome the YMCA of York as a program partner this year. Selassie, through research and storytelling, reassures us that we do belong, even though at times we may feel disconnected. She offers suggestions for us to move back to a place where we will all feel that we belong. This evening's topic is You Belong Here and Now. We will have one presentation followed by a discussion session. Unfortunately, our second presenter, Rachel Rosado, could not join us this evening due to unforeseen circumstances. Dr. J will extend his message and information with us. Attendees will be muted during the presentation. You are welcome to put your questions and comments in the chat. We will be sure to share them after both speakers. We will unmute during the Q&A afterwards if you want to ask your questions verbally.
Thank you all for being here. And once again, I would like to thank for being invited for this presentation. It's an honor to be here. And I would like to say at the outset that this is a book that I fell in love with. I feel that books tend to find us, and this is a book I feel has found me, and thanks for everyone to make this happen. There are a few elements that I was able to connect very deeply with this book. Right? My name is Thimmapuram. I'm an internal medicine physician at Wellspan York Hospital. And one of my fields of interest is meditation. And this is a topic that has deeply interested me. But I have to confess that when I started the practice of meditation, it was out of curiosity. My dad is a retired professor of zoology. And he used to meditate, right? He still does. And not only him, but also his friends used to come and they all used to sit down and meditate, right? To me, it looked silly. How can people just sit down, close their eyes and do nothing, right? So I asked my dad what this business of doing nothing was all about. And this is what he said. If you want to explore anything, right, you can try it first. And there are two possibilities. Either you're going to like it or you don't like it, right? If you like it, you can proceed on with it. If you don't like it, it's okay. You have learned something from it and you move on, right? And this is how my practice of meditation or settling the mind or training the mind or regulating the mind started. And many times when we talk about meditative practices, right, we often feel that it is a practice where there is going to be an absolutely calm inner state. There's absolute bliss, as if we are on cloud 9, right? But let me assure you, it's not the case, right? At least not for me. When I started the practice of meditation, I was 18 years old, right? I was a college student. And when I started the practice, it was difficult for me to sit. It was difficult for me to close my eyes and be in the state of meditation for a fixed period of time, right? And there was a time when I used to close my eyes for about 5 minutes and felt that an hour had passed, and I opened my eyes and it was just 5 minutes, right? And there are times when I used to have a timer for about 20 minutes, right? And I used to open my eyes for every 5 minutes to see if the timer was done, right? So the reason I'm trying to say this is when we try something new, it will be, it's not something that is so easy, right? For some, it may be easy. For some, it is a practice, right? But when I started doing it, it didn't right away made me feel so great about it, right? But the good thing that I did was I carried on with it. For about 4 weeks, I tried to meditate as much as I could. But there was one session when I was meditating with a trainer, right? And the practice of meditation that I am familiar with, it's called Heartfulness, a simple heart-based meditation practice, right? There are some elements that are very similar to mindfulness, but it's a practice where it's all about being heartful, right? Um, so one of these sessions when I was meditating with a trainer, it was a wonderful session. It almost felt as if my mind was removed, dipped in pure water and put back in again, right? And such an experience I never had before. And for the first time, I felt, wow, there is something to this practice of meditation that makes us feel settled, calm, and not only that, there is a different flavor to it, which was very deep, right? And this is what made me carry on for a little bit longer. But being on the medical side, right, this mind of science is inquisitive, and it starts to question. And I was no exception. After going through some deep experiences in meditation, the mind still questions. Maybe it was just your own imagination. Maybe it was all fluke, right? And this is how I felt too. But as I carried on with it, there were some opportunities to try and test it out from a scientific point of view. And what I did was, in our hospital, we have resident physicians, faculty members, nurses, right? And we try to offer these practices of meditation, heartfulness, to see if it would improve their sense of loneliness, whether it would improve sleep, whether it would improve burnout, stress. So these are some of the areas that we explored in our hospital. And most of the studies that we have conducted have shown that these practices do help. And this is as a background of how I got interested in these practices of meditation and how it can relate to our current theme of you belong. I was sharing earlier that right now I have 3 copies of this. One, a hard copy of the book. One is Audible, and the other one is the Kindle version, right? And what I would like to cover today is I would like to share some of the points that resonated with me. And these may or may not be the same that would resonate with someone else, but I would like to share the points that I was able to connect with very well, perhaps because of my experience with meditation, right? So let us see if we can move on with some of those things. And as I shared, to me, this book is a wonderful treasure. It's a wonderful treasure to understand life. And I'm in love with this book. There are many points that connected with me very deeply. And what I will do is I'll share some of the ideas from this book. Next slide, please. There is a statement in this book that keeps repeating itself at multiple places. It's a very profound statement. Although we are not one, we are not separate. And although we are not separate, we are not the same. Let that sink in for a little bit. Right? And we will come to it later on again. Although we are not one, we are not separate. And although we are not separate, we are not the same. A very profound message in few short sentences. Next slide, please. There are times when we do feel disconnected. There are times when we do feel that we don't belong, whether it is a group of people or a situation, right? It doesn't matter. There are many times when we feel we are disconnected, right? And there may be times when we feel insecure. There may be times when we feel angry or anxious, fearful, sad, so many emotions that separate us and make us isolate into within ourselves, right? And this sense of isolation, this sense of disconnectedness is something that we don't often like, right? And these are the unpleasant feelings. What do we do when we get these unpleasant feelings? We try to push those feelings away. We do not want to face them. But what is it that we can do to get over that, right? Is pushing away those feelings the right way to do it? We will talk about that too. Let me share an example. We all go through difficult situations in life. We all go through situations where there may be a friction with someone else, right? And I am no exception. And there was an instance when there was some friction with one of my colleagues in the hospital, right? And I felt I was right, right? And when we feel we are right, it is a very difficult situation because we do not want to lose that feeling. Right? And I was not sure why this friction was happening. And there were feelings of resentment. There were feelings of perhaps very uncomfortable situation within myself, right? And this led to a state where I did not feel that I was connected. And having practiced meditation for over 25 years now, I wanted to find out, what? Do these practices actually work in a practical way, right? So I came home, I sat in my room, I closed my eyes and settled down within my heart, within the stillness of my own heart, without any preconditioned ideas or preconceived notions, right? And I waited. I let this situation settle down. Within about 15 minutes or so, there was something wonderful that happened. There was an inner shift. And that inner shift manifested itself where I was able to look at things through the viewpoint of the others. I was able to see things through the other person's eyes, the way the other person was seeing it. And you know what happened? I absolutely felt that the other person was right. It didn't take much time, right? And it was an eye opener for me. What we hold very dear to ourselves, our own ideas, the feeling that we are always right. When we look at it very closely, if we have the ability to look at ourselves very closely, most often we find that the other person may also be right. Right? And all I did was I went back to hospital. I went to this person and I said from the bottom of my heart, I'm really sorry. That's all it took. I don't know how the other person felt, but to me, it felt as if a ton of bricks fell off my own heart. That sense of lightness that I experienced, and it was almost as if nothing had ever happened. And both of us, we went for a cup of coffee, and that's it. That was the end of it. So these little things that we go through in life, right? This little ability to overcome our own resistance to simple things, to go back and say, hey, you know what, I'm really sorry. That's all it takes to build this connection, to make us feel that we belong together again. And that may be the only thing that needs to be done, right? One time, one of my meditation teachers shared a very simple but very profound message. There were a group of people sitting. So he took a piece of paper and there were the questions on viewpoints. That was the topic that was being discussed. So he drew a mountain on the piece of paper and he drew two people, one on each side of the mountain. And he said, these two people, they're at the same height, at the same altitude. But what one person is able to see from one side of the mountain is not the same as what the other person sees from the other side of the mountain. Does it mean that one is right and the other one is wrong? No. Both are right from their own viewpoints. But if we really want to find out the whole picture, you have to get to the top of the mountain, right? And at that time, we will be able to take a look at things from a overall viewpoint and see that everyone belongs, right? And if we want to get to that point, our own inner state has to be in that calmness, in that state of stillness. When we get to that point, it becomes easier for us to accept others and also feel that we are comfortable in any situation. Next slide, please. The other aspect that I really liked about the book was this inner connectedness, right? There are levels of understanding. There are levels of connectedness. We can be connected with others at a superficial level. We can also be connected with others in a deeper way, right? It is not an intellectual understanding. It is not about this idea that everything is connected. It is about a feeling. And diving down to the level where we actually feel that we are connected, that is the state that we need to move on to experience that this is all connected. Up until that point, it is an intellectual understanding. It is a knowledge. Knowledge is good, but unless that knowledge is put into practice, that knowledge has not done its job yet. And how do we get to understand the knowledge in a deeper way? It is only through experience. It is only through practice. And when we do that practice, we get to the state where this understanding of knowledge at a superficial level transforms to a knowledge at a deeper level, which is manifested through the feelings. Next slide, please. As I shared, there were some studies that we conducted on loneliness in our hospital. Parallel to this pandemic that is raging globally, there is an epidemic of loneliness that is also going side by side. And this loneliness is not about being in the midst of hundreds of people. It is not about the number of people that we are connected with. It is about the meaningfulness of that connection and depth of that connection. Even if we are connected with one person in our lives, and that connection is deep and meaningful, we do not feel disconnected. We do not feel lonely. And it is that meaningfulness, it is the depth that the human heart longs for. There are times when we do feel lonely, and it may not be due to the connection with others. It may also be due to the connection that we have within our own selves. How are we connected with our own hearts? How are we connected with ourselves? Is there a friction within, or is there harmony within? Right? How do we move from this state of friction to a state of harmony within ourselves? It has nothing to do with anyone else, right? So we wanted to find out whether these practices improve loneliness. And what we did was this. We offered the practices of heartfulness for 4 weeks to physicians and advanced practice providers. And after 4 weeks, we measured loneliness before and after. Right? We saw that loneliness scores improved with statistical significance. And hand in hand, their sleep also improved. Loneliness is about the relationship that one has with others and also with oneself, right? When the participant asked me, how is this meditation going to help with this feeling of loneliness, right? I told them, a mind that is well rested will be able to socialize well. A poorly rested mind will not be able to socialize well. A poorly rested mind would want to isolate itself. A mind that is well rested can easily connect with positive attributes of gratitude and joy. A mind that is poorly rested, that is longing to just calm down, right? It is very difficult for that state of mind to experience the state of joy or gratitude because there is a lot going on within the mind. And when we practice meditation, right? Sometimes my residents ask me, Dr. J, what do you do in meditation? You just simply close your eyes. It almost feels like you are doing nothing, right? And I tell them, yes, it feels like we are doing nothing, but maybe we are doing something important, perhaps the most important thing that we can do. To put it simply, when we close our eyes, it feels as if we are putting up with our own selves, right? And when we are trying to put up with our own selves, now we know that it is not so easy to put up with our own selves, right? And if it is so difficult to put up with our own selves, how do we expect others to put up with us, right? But if we are able to rest our attention on something good within our own hearts, the intrinsic goodness of our hearts, slowly this inner landscape starts to change. And as this landscape starts to change, it becomes easier to navigate through our own inner landscape. We become comfortable with ourselves. We become, it's as if there is an inner ease, the ease of connecting with others as a result of being at ease with ourselves. That is one of the results. And what we have shown in this study was that simple practices where we can regulate our mind, settling it down for a little bit, can lead to many positive results, including improving this feeling of belonging. Next slide, please. You know, in the book, I also like this topic on Ubuntu, right? It means that I recognize all people as me, right? All things are people, animals are people, trees are people, the sky is people, mountains are people, water is people, rocks are people. What does that mean? You know, when we look at some of the ancient traditions, right? They look at all these aspects of nature and look at these aspects of nature as people. When we look at it through that viewpoint, right, our relationship with that changes. A sense of connection develops. There is a very deep wisdom in this. What we understand as energy, right, often referred to as spirit, soul, mystery in the indigenous wisdom. This is all percolating. And it is that we refer to when we say everything is connected. And even science says that everything that we look at, even matter, is only energy in the form of matter, right? And if we look at it from that standpoint, everything that we look at its basic level, is only that very subtle energy that is percolating through everything and everyone. Next slide, please. You know, another word that was very striking in the book is this word called epistemicide. Sebene Selassie uses this word. You know, it's all about identification, right? When we identify ourselves with something, and we identify ourselves with something, and we feel that that identification leads to this greatness, and therefore everything else is not so great, right? We begin to not look at other things the same way as we should, right? If anything that looks different to my thinking, my way, it must be wrong and does not have a right to exist. And this is how a lot of ancient wisdom has been lost. And Sebene Selassie in her book also talks about how some streams of knowledge still continued, and still there is a lot of wisdom that is available through these ancient practices. Next slide, please. And I also like some of the areas where Sebene Selassie talks about her own state of mind. She's a meditation teacher, right? But yet, she experiences states and she describes it. When thinking runs amok, I can become consumed by non-stop mental chatter. And this becomes an impediment to clarity. I am no longer able to bring curiosity or kindness to the moment. When we get caught up in this whirlwind of thoughts, right, it is difficult to come back to the present moment. It is very difficult to even think about kindness, forget about being kind. So this mental chatter is something that is often distracting, and it can take us away from what is needed at that particular moment. And this is not uncommon. We all get carried away, right? But when it happens, this idea that one is carried away, if that idea is there, then we can do something about it. There is a word called metacognition, where it is all about knowing when the mind is thinking and thinking about thinking, right? Knowing that these are the thoughts that are going on is one of the areas where metacognition comes into play. And how do we develop a state where we are able to settle the mind down? We need to take a little time. We cannot ask the mind to settle down just in an instant. We have let it go on for a long period of time on its own. And if we want to settle it down, it is not something that is going to listen to us, right? But the key is this: be gentle with your own self. That is the key. If you are able to be gentle with yourself, right, it is possible to settle the mind down. When we try to force it, it is not something that will listen. And one of the beautiful examples that I like is mind is like a puppy, right? What do we do when we want to train a puppy, right? We give the puppy some treats. We ask the puppy to sit down, right? And what does it do? It sits down, it has the treat, and it starts going away, right? And what do? We bring the puppy back. We ask the puppy to sit down, right? The puppy sits for a little bit, gets up, wanders away. We bring the puppy back. So this is how the mind is, right? We don't force the puppy. We try to very gently deal with the puppy, right? In a similar way, if we are able to deal with our own minds in that gentle and kind way, self-compassion, that kindness that we show to our own selves, goes a long way in training the mind. Next slide, please. There are some very profound statements in the book that I really liked. All great spiritual traditions mention kindness and forgiveness towards all beings. All beings include our adversaries. You are also all beings. It is not something that is limited to our friends. It extends to everyone, including our adversaries or so-called enemies, right? If we don't do that, there is stagnation, and slowly anything that is stagnated will begin to lose its fragrance. Even the most fresh air, if it is stagnated, it will start to not be so fresh anymore, right? You have to let it flow. And if we really want to extend this kindness and forgiveness, it has to be extended to everyone. We can start off with someone close to us, but slowly extend it, and then it offers that feeling of inner freedom. And when that is experienced, it becomes much easier to manage life. There is another quote from Nelson Mandela, right? Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies, right? Something that I really like reading. Next slide, please. This is a slide that I think we should spend a little bit time, right? Life is not all about me, myself, and I, right? If it is all about me, myself, and I, no, I don't think the life will have much of a flavor, right? It is centered around oneself. There is no scope for expansion, right? And sometimes when we are in that state, it feels as if my way of thinking is right. And when we are deeply engrossed with that feeling, we become frustrated by the inability of others to change their perspectives to what we think is right. And Sebene Selassie beautifully puts it, this is an attitude of domination, a belief of superiority. It's okay to feel that our thinking is right, but have this idea that the thinking of others is also correct. And that is something that needs to be nurtured from very early on in our lives. Right? If we are able to nurture that feeling, it opens up the opportunity to look at things from different viewpoints. Otherwise, we will be very limited to our own viewpoint. The beauty of multiple viewpoints is lost in this. Next slide, please. One of my meditation teachers said something very beautiful, very profound. He said, it's okay to consider oneself to be great. By all means, go for it, right? But consider the other person is greater. It will lead to a state of balance. It will even things out, and it opens doors for relationships to build. One of the most difficult walls to break is the wall that we create for ourselves, right? No one else can break for us. It has to be broken by ourselves, by allowing this idea that life is not about me alone. It is about ourselves. No, it's very true. But it is also about everything and everyone in life, right? And when we feel that life is about everything and everyone, our boundary expands, our periphery expands, we belong to a wider circumference, right? But if there is a next level, what would it look like? The essence of the heart of humanity has its center everywhere, but its circumference is nowhere, right? And when we get to that, when we become one with that, when we are in touch with that center within our own hearts of humanity, right? We begin to feel that there is no boundary. That limitless expansion that we feel comes from this. And a key attribute to that is humility. And humility is one of the factors that can bring humanity together. And humanity without humility may not exist for long. Next slide, please. And in the book, Sebene Selassie, she also talks about a very important aspect of life. And it is all about competing, right? By the time we are grown-ups, right? We want to be better. We want to be healthier, thinner, richer, funnier, calmer, prettier. This ER is about comparison. And it is all about comparison with someone else. My neighbor has a car, I need to have a car. My neighbor has a swimming pool, I need to have a swimming pool. My neighbor has a basement, I need to have a basement, right? So this comparison, right? There is no end to it. And that leads to a state where we become ambitious, where we want to be better than everyone else. If we are able to have this idea of betterment, but in a different way, it changes the way one looks at things. And the way to change that is, I need to be better today than I was yesterday. If we are able to change that attitude, that I need to work on myself to become a better human being, a better version of my own self. I should be better today compared to what I was yesterday. And this changes the whole equation, where this ambition changes into an inner aspiration to become a better human being, a better version of oneself, a person who's perhaps kinder, who's empathetic, who's compassionate, a person who's loving, caring, and joyful. And these are the aspects that one can work on, and there is no finish line to that excellence. And there is at no point we can say we have achieved it. So it is a work in progress that keeps going on, and we begin to realize that it is a beautiful journey of improving oneself to become a better human being. Next slide, please. And the same thing, put in different way, it's all about greater than, less than, or equal to. This is the way the mind thinks, right? Greater than, less than, or equal to. It is again all about comparison. It is okay to have this idea of greater, lesser, and equal, but deep within, know that everything is connected and everything has a place in this vast universe. Next slide, please. One of the slides, one of the topics that intrigued me a lot, the word that Sebene Selassie uses, the orphans of consciousness. These words kind of intrigue me quite a bit, right? We all have our own thinking patterns. We all have our own emotional states that we go through, our own experiences. All these experiences lead to some results, and that seed of that result is buried within, right? And these are the orphans of consciousness. And some of these seeds lead to bias, right? And though we may not be aware of this bias at a conscious level, deep within, because of the seeds that we may not even know exist within ourselves, lead to this inner state of bias. And if we really want to become a better version of oneself, it is not at the superficial level that we need to change. And even this deep seeds that Sebene Selassie causes, the orphans of consciousness, they need to be cleaned out too. They need to be removed so that the way in which we approach each other is harmonious and loving and caring. Next slide, please. There are 4 things that Sebene Selassie talks about belonging, right? Belonging is number 1. Number 2, belonging is in the present moment. Number 3, belonging is revealed through awareness. And belonging is embodied. Only when we are here, it is possible for us to experience this belonging, because this is the experience that we currently have. Next slide, please. And some other ideas that I resonated with were the words aspiration and acceptance, right? We talked about aspiration, aspiring from within to become a better version of oneself, but at the same time, accepting oneself as we are, right? We don't have to accept ourselves after we become something. When we accept ourselves as we are, it is possible for us to become something better than ourselves, right? And it happens through practice. And practice forms the foundation. For anything in life, we need a little practice, right? To become a physician, we need to practice. To become a musician, we need to practice. To become a better human being, it is also important to practice being a better human being, right? And for that, it is important to center oneself and be grounded, which can be a bit of a challenge. And for that, training again and again can help. Another interesting statement is this: enlightenment is an accident, right? And meditation makes you accident prone. I really love this, right? There's nothing guaranteed, even in meditative practices, right? But the chances of us becoming a better version of ourselves are improved with practices of meditation. And it can also lead us to a state where we are not too much influenced by our likes and dislikes, by pleasure and pain. Not that we don't feel them, we feel them, but we are not too much influenced by them, right? And it can help us get through life with a state of inner ease. And that ease can be cultivated through practices such as training the mind through meditation. And meditation, simply put, is a practice where we try to regulate the mind and let the mind settle down a little bit. And as it settles down, we begin to experience that there is something much more deeper in life, much more meaningful in life, which makes us a better human being. Next slide, please. And that is what I wanted to share today. And if there are any questions, I'd be very happy to answer if I can. And one of the ideas that we wanted to share is, if you would be interested in trying a short meditation session, maybe for 5 minutes, I'd be very happy to lead a session.
Thank you, Dr. J, for this very thought-provoking and helpful information. All right, now we're going to take questions now, and once we're finished with the questions, Dr. J can lead us in a meditation session. Well, we already have several people saying they're interested in the session, Dr. J.
Excellent.
Catherine has raised her hand.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi. So it was really interesting hearing your perspective. I have PTSD, and I had anxiety for about 5 years from work related, and I battled with it because I tried to take like a holistic approach towards dealing with it. I was never medicated for any of my diagnosis. So I did try meditation through a friend of mine who is also a holistic teacher. And I found that like even my anxiety and some of my triggers that were causing PTSD to really come out were really significantly different. And they did some testing on me like after I started meditating for about 2 years. And they said to me, they're like, what have you been doing differently? Because like you really improved, like my heart rate really became normal and was very balanced. And a lot of things, I was even eating healthier. So I know like in medicine, especially with like anxiety and depression and all this stuff, they tend to push medicine. That wasn't a resort for me. I felt like it wasn't my option. And I'm glad that I did that because it opened me up to try something more holistic and more being dependent on a spiritual power versus being committed to a medicine. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that, Catherine. That's very profound. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. J, if you would feel comfortable, you can please go ahead and lead us through the meditation session.
Sure. Let's do it.
Thank you.
So for this, all we do is we sit very comfortably. So please sit comfortably and gently close your eyes. Breathe normally. Let's begin with the toes. You may wiggle your toes a little bit and allow your toes to relax. Feel a very gentle and healing energy entering your feet from the ground, allowing your feet to completely relax. Let this energy slowly move up. Relaxing your ankles, your lower legs, the calf muscles, your knees, upper legs, and your hips. Feel all these parts completely relaxed. Let this energy slowly move up, relaxing your lower back and your upper back. Feel your entire back relaxed. Very slowly, move your attention to your stomach area and allow all the muscles in there to relax. Move into your chest and allow your chest to deeply and completely relax. Move on to your shoulders. Feel them getting lighter as if they're melting away. Let this energy slowly move into your upper arms, elbows, your lower arms, your hands, and your fingers all the way to the fingertips. Slowly relax your neck. Gently loosen your jaw. Allow your chin to relax. Your lips and your eyes are very gently closed. Relax all the muscles of your face, including your forehead. Gently move into your mind and allow your mind to deeply and completely relax. Relax all the way to the top of your head and the back of your head. Gently scan your whole body from the top of your head to the tips of your toes and feel your entire body relaxed. Very slowly, move into your heart and settle in there. Rest your attention on the source of light within your heart. Do this in a very gentle and natural way. and continue to stay there for a little bit. You may slowly come back to the present moment. And very gently open your eyes. Gently make a note of how you're feeling. And once again, thank you all for joining today.
Thank you so much, Dr. J. That was absolutely beautiful and very much needed by me. So I greatly appreciate that. Everyone, my name is Laura Lynn. I've been hiding in the background, not getting my tech working. That's the new voice. I do want to ask you to stay tuned for next Thursday's program. You belong because you matter, and so do they. This topic explores finding joy through acceptance and diversity. The presenters will be Kim Brister, Vice President of Diversity and Equity Inclusion Officer at Wellspan Health, as well as Jose Santiago, Director of YMCA New American Welcoming Center.
All right, and some changes to our end of series programming. You Belong With Us was an in-person event to be held on Thursday, September 2nd. Unfortunately, due to recent developments in the COVID-19 pandemic, the program has been postponed. Reminder, however, please complete the reader survey available in chat to be entered for a chance to meet the author and receive an autographed copy of You Belong when Sebene Selassie visits our area on Monday, October 11th. Good night, everyone. Stay well, stay connected to your library.